Behold, it is I, Sir Roderick. I am a brave and valiant knight. I am also a Jedi. And I'm also a wizard. And I am also a librarian on Tuesdays. Because it's important that the Jedi, the magician, and the knight all work together in understanding. Hello and welcome to this video on multiclassing and how you should do it correctly and what you should avoid so that you don't become a knight who's a Jedi librarian on their off days. So multiclassing, there are a lot of aspects to it, and in the old days multiclassing was something that was looked on as a bit of a taboo, really. It was so difficult to do, so difficult to achieve any kind of real character satisfaction that a lot of people kind of shunned it. And there were a few exceptions, of course, and there were some builds that came out of significance where the characters had a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Generally speaking, however, multiclassing left you rather at a disadvantage than at an advantage. Today's sort of systems, role-playing systems, have now kind of gone, well, we don't really need to be so restrictive on people playing different classes. As a matter of fact, there's been a bit of a move towards removing classes altogether so that you can build exactly what you want. So when we look at multiclassing, I think as players, we need to look at it from a few different angles aside from purely the mechanical perspective. And if you're hoping for some tips and tricks on how to build the ultimate multiclassing character, that's not something that you're going to find on my channel. I suggest you head on over to Nerdarchy or to Taking 20 or to XP to level 3. They love building those kinds of things within the games that they play. We are talking about the narrative reason, the actual story of why you would want to multiclass. So let's jump straight into it. Let's have a look at why. Why would you want to become a cross-dressing Ewok Wookiee? I don't know. That was the first thing that came to my mind, and I apologize for that. It should go away. Go away. Why? Well, narratively speaking, your character might start out as a warrior, but over time, because they're exposed to certain religious elements, starts to become a little bit more divine orientated, and so then multiclasses into a paladin. In other words, they are narratively, they're moving forward. They are changing, they're adapting to the environment in which they find themselves in. This is an absolutely stock standard, very words gone out of my head. It is a very robust route to take when multiclassing. It makes perfect sense. Everyone has seen the journey that the character is on, so they understand why the character is doing it. I've even had players who have decided that they are going to multiclass. And so they start building it into their narrative. They start having the character practice with a sword because they feel they need to be more efficient in combat. And then discover that actually, because they were trying to gear up to becoming a multi-class character of one particular build, it actually didn't fit with the narrative as the narrative expanded. And in them actually practicing to be a different class, they discovered altogether that they needed to stay the class that they were and not multi-class. So the narrative led them towards a multi-class and then away from a multi-class. I've played characters recently where the character was, in the backstory, someone who was a mage and then decided that they didn't want to be a mage because they felt that the magic was cheating and they didn't feel that they were good enough for it. So they then changed, they multi-classed into a fighter. This was before the game even started. We were starting at level 5, I think it was. So we had the ability to have these multi-class characters enter into the game. Once they were in the game, they tried to continue on the journey that the character had begun by following this route of being a fighter. But they realized that they weren't helping their friends by holding their magic back. And once they then started to embrace that magic, they started to swing back towards the magic user that they had started out as. And that narrative journey was a very, very entertaining, very engaging character arc that allowed the character to grow and change and regrow, as it were, from a narrative perspective of multiclassing. It was a very good, I think, journey that the character went on. Now, evolution is slightly different. Evolution here is where we save a character. Oftentimes, we might create characters that we think we're going to like, but after a couple sessions, we go, oh, I don't actually connect with this character. I don't like this character. Instead of killing the character off, and I have done videos on this before, instead of killing the character off, the character could evolve. The character could change. What if the character suddenly went, I'm frustrated with life. I want a new direction. I want to try something new. And so the character picks up a lance or starts piloting the starship in their spare time and starts to learn how to become a starship captain. That is an evolution. Although, yes, it is told in a narrative way. We always want to tell things in a narrative way. It's how you as the player are evolving your character into something new whilst maintaining all of the backstory and all of the character interactions that this character has had up to date. There's nothing worse than having been part of a party and then suddenly having that character leave, die, disappear, whatever, and then bringing in a new character who doesn't have any of that history. It's very disruptive. It can cause all of the old stories to suddenly feel hollow and no longer of interest to the rest of the players. So if you evolve your character, if you shift your character towards something that they want to be or that you think is going to be more interesting for you to play, it gives you narrative, but it also gives you the reason to keep your character in the game and as a result to keep the game moving forward. It then also brings in uniqueness. There's no doubt about it. It definitely creates a unique space, a unique character that hasn't been seen before, that has got a lot of unique skills and attributes and abilities. So there is no reason not to build a multi-class character if that's what you're going for. If you want someone who can fly through the air and drop kick somebody and then karate chop them and at the same time research magic and spells, well, why not? It's perfectly valid to have this idea that, well, this is a character who's just been curious and has done this and that. No reason not to. So if we look at then the mechanics, this is not a mechanical breakdown, as I have said at the beginning of the video, but this is a mechanical perspective where we then go to the GM and we ask for the GM approval. This is what I'm thinking of doing. This is what I'm thinking of multiclassing into. This is the build I'm kind of going for. What do you think? The GM is unlikely to say, no, it can't possibly happen. Especially if you've been setting it up that your character has been practicing starship piloting or has been practicing using a longsword. For the last few sessions, nobody understood why, but now it starts to become clear at the next leveling up of the character, at the next character advancement, they're going to shift into a different class. Speak to your GM, get your GM's approval. Always do that anyway. It should just be part of your natural player mode of operation, I should say. Plan your journey. So don't just say, right, I'm leveling up and I don't want to be this character anymore. I'm going to be a druid now. I'm a druid. Look, I'm a druid. Plan it out. Work out what steps your character is going to take to get there. What attitude shifts do they need to have? What mindset shifts do they need to have? If you go from being a lawyer to suddenly a plumber, your mindset has to change quite drastically. No longer are you dealing with people, you're now dealing with hardware. No longer are you dealing with other slimy lawyers, you're now dealing with slimy bits of muck in a very dark, dank and moist situation. Okay, so no change there. I had to make that joke. I had to make that joke. I didn't have a choice. It was narrative requirement. Nonetheless, plan out your journey and then wait it out. Wait it out. So don't just suddenly leap into, oh, well, look, suddenly my character's now got this thing. Plan it out and say, okay, well, it's going to take a couple sessions to get there. Have patience and enjoy the fact that your character is learning this and they're busy learning that and they're struggling to use a blade because they don't yet have proficiency in it, because they don't yet have that multi-class allowance for it. Enjoy those moments. Let them build it up. This is your Rocky moment. This is you running up the steps, training. It's that kind of montage, but you can play it out over 2 or 3 sessions where your character does all of that running up and down the stairs and whatnot to Eye of the Tiger music. I mean, these happen in a film for a reason. It's about the character going on a journey, which is kind of the whole point, in my opinion anyway. So when it comes to the mechanics, plan it out, work out what your character needs to start expressing in order to make it seem as if your character was going in that direction naturally anyway, and then play it out and wait it out if you can't do it immediately. So those are the mechanics. Then from a story perspective, something that you've got to look at, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily look at this, and it's a major opportunity for role-playing that is missed, is moving forward. Now that the character has become this multi-class, is there reluctance? Is there sadness? Is there... No, I remember when days were simpler and I didn't have to worry about X, or I never knew that this is what one had to do when you became a starship captain. All of the bureaucracy is really killing me. I hate it so much. I wish I could go back to being a gunner. So look at what is now happening to the character moving forward. Do they look back? Do they reminisce? Do they necessarily... They don't obviously mechanically go back and reread their books on faith or etc., because they've just suddenly abandoned being a cleric. They can go back narratively and reflect and contemplate and look at those things. It might be a single moment in the entire campaign where your character reminisces on what they were and how far they've come. It might be that you are reflecting with somebody else's character who's multi-classed, and your character is sitting there with them going, "Oh, do you remember when you couldn't do this, but only that? I remember those days. Those were good days. You must be happy now that you can do more. Or do you miss it?" All those kinds of questions make character interaction feel much more real and as if the other players have been part of your journey. Now, conflicts can arise, and that's conflicts with the other PCs. You are now no longer what you used to be, you are now something new. Maybe you no longer have the same functionality that you had before. Maybe your character is now stepping on the toes of somebody else's character. What are the conflicts internally between yourself? I used to be a man of peace, now I'm a man of war. I used to be someone who advocated nature before anything else. Now, because of my journey, I advocate burning everything down and starting again. What are the conflicts that are going to arise as a result of this multi-class? And what can you do to make them bigger so that they come to the front, so they become part of the story, they become part of the journey? And what's the discovery? Oftentimes a character goes, "Oh, I think I want to be a mage." And then bingo, they're a mage. There's no sense of wonderment that I can now cast fire from my hands. And then when they level up again, it's like, now I have learned to manipulate this fire, and look, I can make little dragons out of it. And then later on, I can now hurl this and make, whoa, giant explosions out of it. It's about looking at the discovery and learning these new things and adapting and adding them to your character's repertoire, working with the other PCs to now look at, yes, I can no longer do that, or maybe I can, but it's not very good anymore. I can now do this. How do we now work together? So those conflicts, those discoveries, that moving forward, that's all part of multiclassing after you've done it, and allows you, I beg your pardon, it allows you the opportunities to again engage with your fellow players and to engage with more story options, which is ultimately what this whole channel is about anyway, is being a better role player, which means to tell better stories. So multiclassing is definitely something that can be done, especially in today's modern mechanics and things. It's certainly something that allows you to explore different options, allows you to explore different character types, allows you to change a character that you didn't necessarily like before, but it gives you so much more moving forward. And I think oftentimes people forget that. They forget to look back at where their character was and how far they've come, and what the new character, or the new class I should say, brings to the party dynamic and how it changes it and what conflicts arise because of that as well. Anyway, enough from me. I have dragons to slay. Until next week, I wish you and yours the happiest of playing. Okay, so I didn't like the librarian, so I've dropped the librarian. Now I'm just a Jedi and a knight, and I think that's much better for my character. So also, I didn't subscribe to the idea that my character was going to go on an emotional journey like the Jedi usually do, which is where they become impassive and stuff. So my Jedi is much more neutral. He kind of just rings the bell in the middle ground rather than the light side or the dark side. So that's kind of where I'm going to be at from now on. So just think of me as a knight who is also a Jedi, but is in like the middle.